So, what's the one thing every single one of us is chasing? I mean, what's the ultimate goal of everything we do, day in and day out? For thousands of years, the answer has pretty much been the same: happiness. But what does that word actually mean? Well, today, we're going to dig into one of the most practical guides ever written on how to live a good life, straight from the mind of the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle. Here's the game plan. We're going to follow Aristotle's blueprint step by step. First, we'll figure out what our ultimate target in life should be. Then, we'll clear away some common ideas about what happiness isn't. After that, we'll get to his core definition of a good life. And finally, we'll explore the practical tools he gives us for building character and making better decisions. Let's get into it. So, where do we even begin with a question this big? Well, Aristotle starts with a really simple but profound observation, and he sets up this great metaphor that's going to guide us through this whole thing. He wants us to just stop and think about our own lives. Why do you go to work? To earn money. Okay, why do you want money? Maybe to buy a house. Why the house? For security, for comfort. See? Every action we take is aimed at some kind of good. But is there a final good? One thing we want just for its own sake, not as a stepping stone to something else? Aristotle says yes, there is. And finding it is the most important thing we can possibly do. And this is where he drops that killer analogy. His point is just so simple and elegant. If you don't even know what you're aiming for, how can you possibly hope to hit it? Living a good life without a clear goal is like an archer just shooting arrows randomly into the dark. Knowing our chief good, our ultimate target, gives our whole life direction and purpose. Now, most of us would probably hear that and say, yeah, okay, the ultimate target is happiness. Got it. But here's the catch. We all have totally different ideas about what that word even means. So before Aristotle tells us what happiness is, he first needs to clear the table of the most common, but in his view, mistaken ideas. First up, let's look at the most popular candidate, right? A life that's just filled with pleasure, fun, and amusement. Isn't that what we're all after? A life of just ease and constant enjoyment? Aristotle's take? Nope, not even close. His logic is that amusement is kind of like relaxation. It's something we need so we can get back to our serious activities. It's a means to an end, not the end itself. The idea of spending your entire life working and struggling just for the sake of amusement seemed, and I quote, silly and utterly childish to him. All right, so if it's not pleasure, then what about the next obvious choice? Getting rich? Surely a life of financial security and abundance has to be the good life, right? Again, Aristotle's going to shut that down. Think about it. We don't want money just to have a pile of it. We want it for what it can get us. Security, comfort, opportunities. Since wealth is always just a tool for the sake of something else, it can't by definition be the final good we're looking for. Okay, last try. What about honor? Today we might call this status or fame or recognition from our peers. Being respected and admired by everyone, that must be the key, right? His argument here is so subtle and powerful. First, we seek honor because we want it to confirm that we're good, which means happiness is still the real goal. But more importantly, honor is fragile. It completely depends on other people giving it to you. And well, they can take it away just as easily. The true good, Aristotle insists, has to be something that is truly our own, something that can't be so easily stripped away. So, if happiness isn't pleasure, it's not wealth, and it's not honor, what in the world is it? Now, we get to the absolute heart of Aristotle's big idea. The word he uses is eudaimonia. And honestly, happiness is kind of a lousy translation. It's much, much closer to the idea of human flourishing, of thriving, of living at your absolute best. Think of it like this. The excellence of a knife is to cut well. The excellence of a racehorse is to run fast. So the key question for Aristotle becomes, what is the unique function, the unique excellence of a human being? And here it is, his famous answer. So let's unpack this for a second. First, he says it's in activity. Happiness isn't some passive feeling you just get, it's something you actively do. Second, it's an activity of the soul, which for him really means using our reason, our highest ability. Third, it has to be in accordance with virtue or excellence. And finally, this isn't a one-and-done deal, it's something you have to sustain over a complete life. This is an amazing definition, right? But it immediately raises a huge question. If happiness is all about virtuous activity, how do we actually become virtuous people in the first place? Well, Aristotle splits virtue into two types. You've got your intellectual virtues. These are things you can learn from a teacher or a book, like wisdom or scientific knowledge. But then you have moral virtues, things like courage, patience, justice. And these are different. He says we're not born good or bad, but we are born with the potential to become good. And the way we unlock that potential is through one thing: practice, through habit. The idea here is actually really simple and intuitive. Aristotle says we become builders by building. We become brave by doing brave things. It's a feedback loop. You don't start out as a courageous person who then goes and does courageous stuff. You become courageous by repeatedly doing courageous things over and over until it's just second nature. In the end, your character is simply the sum of your habits. Okay, so we know we have to practice virtuous actions. We have to build good habits. But in any given situation, how do we know what the virtuous action actually is? This brings us to Aristotle's most famous and maybe most useful practical tool. He argues that for pretty much any feeling or action, the virtuous path lies somewhere in the middle of two extremes. It's what he calls the golden mean. It's the sweet spot between having way too much of something and having way too little. Let's make this super concrete. Take courage, for example. A person who runs away from every single danger is a coward. That's the vice of deficiency. Not enough fear. Someone who runs headfirst into any danger, no matter how stupid, is rash. That's the vice of excess. Not enough fear. The virtue, courage, is the mean. It's feeling the right amount of fear for the right reason in the right way. And the same logic applies to generosity. It's the mean between being a cheapskate and being wastefully extravagant. Okay, we've built this whole amazing picture. Happiness is a life of excellent activity, and we get there by building virtuous habits that always aim for that golden mean. But Aristotle takes it one final step. If there are lots of different virtues, is there one that's the highest? Which activity leads to the most perfect, the most complete form of happiness? His answer is the life of contemplation. Why? Well, for a few reasons. First, he says reason is the best thing in us. It's our highest, most divine-like faculty. Second, we can contemplate and think and learn more continuously than we can do any physical activity. It's also the most self-sufficient. You really don't need much except your own mind. And finally, it's loved purely for its own sake. The reward for thinking is the thinking itself. And this quote just brings his entire argument to its peak. The life spent using our greatest capacity, our reason, to its absolute fullest is the best, the most pleasant, and ultimately the happiest life a human being can possibly live. But look, Aristotle's philosophy isn't just some abstract ideal. It's a practical guide. The life of a pure philosopher might be the peak, but that tool of the golden mean is something every single one of us can apply, right here, right now. So the final question isn't for Aristotle, it's for you. When you think about your work, your relationships, your temper, where are you finding the balance? Where's your mean?